Tips for dealing with the bank. So perhaps you're renting in a property where it is run by a body corporate.
Understanding the basic calculation, income minus expenses, and you want to be left with a positive income.
It is a very tough game. It's not easy at all.
To stay ahead of knowing exactly what your clients need, what their teething issues are.
Have a joint move-in inspection.
That a lot of people that are coming into sectional title or homeowners associations are just like you described, not only first-time homeowners, but first-time owners and residents in community schemes.
They get to see the perspective from the other side of the aisle. And I think that's a really important thing to do.
It's a market that's estimated to be transacting at least 9 billion rand per year. So it's a huge market.
In order to get there, you need to be able to build up a track record.
Your cash flow model needs to be sharp.
A quote comes to mind. The best time to buy a property was about 10 years ago. The next best time is now.
Welcome to our very first episode of the First Time Home Buyer Show. My name is Nicolette Mashile, and I'm quite excited to be here with you tonight on a Friday. Of course, we're going to be keeping it very simple, very easy to understand, but obviously giving you some empowering tips on how you, as a first-time home buyer, can ensure that you actually make the process as simple as possible. Now, of course, I am not by myself. As you know, it is Women's Month, and it was only fitting that we ensure that we bring the right voice so that we make this process as easy as possible for you. And I have absolutely loved this woman from the very first day that I met her. In fact, I saw her at the private property show when she was talking at a stand, and I was like, one day, if I inspire or I aspire to ever be like anybody, this is the person that I want to be like. Her name is Nondumiso Ngapai. She is the head of business development at Absa Home Loans, and she's absolutely fantastic. So today she is going to be helping us unpack why property is such an important asset to have as part of your diverse investment portfolio, but also to understand how the banks can help you as a first-time home buyer. Nondumiso, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Nicolette. It's great to be here, and to all the viewers that are there, I'm so excited to be talking about first-time home buying.
I think what's really interesting, Nondumiso, is the fact that you yourself as a woman really do advocate for women to get into the property space and ensure that when they do it well. Can you tell me a little bit about why you have so much passion for women and seeing them really do well?
You know what, Nicolette, let me share my story. many, many years ago. So I'm not going to share my age, guys. I'm talking here many, 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 many years ago. And I was much younger, in my early 20s. And I remember at the time, I think I had about 10,000 rands at the time. And I wasn't quite sure, should I go into property or travel, etc. Nicolette, let me tell you, I made a decision at the time and I went into property. I bought my first property. It was nerve-wracking, young as a woman. And I look back today, I would do it all over again. And I remember it, you know, I didn't know much about property. I had to do my homework, ask. At the time, I remember my friends were like, hey, what are you doing? You could be doing other things. This piece of land, we can't see your vision here, you know? And I stuck to my vision. And I bought off plan through a developer, and the location was absolutely perfect. And I say this because it will launch us into quite a broader discussion around some of the elements of being a first-time home buyer. And out of it, I was able to use money. Can you imagine? You buy a property and you still get money out of your property and you use it for whatever you need, beyond renovation to traveling to whatever. I did it back then, and I would do it all over again.
That is fantastic to hear. And I can hear already you're pivoting into what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. I just want to get to how you made that decision, because I can imagine, as young as you might have been at that time, there were so many other temptations, so many other things that you could have done. What was your why at that specific?
Yeah. Nicolette, I hope you can hear me. I think for me, the main thing, you know, growing up the way I grew up, you know, you learn to appreciate what you have. And I think the one thing, it was around, how do I begin to create a sense of wealth, even if it's small and it's a start. And it was logical that property was one way of doing exactly that, you know, creating wealth. But I think beyond that, you know, having property sort of gives you that certainty. At least that's how I felt, you know, because there's the structure, you can see it, you can touch it, and that sense of belonging at the time. I think even more so, it touched other elements. You know, as you go through school and you engage with many people, you learn, hey, you don't put your eggs in one basket, you know. And if you want to have diversify, what we often hear as a term is look at other asset types. It could be property, it could be shares. And for me, I thought at the time, you know, this is one way of diversifying the portfolio, even if it was a small way of doing it at the time. And I think the other one was around the possibility of being able to create income. Yes. And I say that because with the property, I could let it out, and I did. And the tenants paid for my bond at the time. So I think that showed me over time, when I look back, that there's so many ways in which you can use property.
But Nondumiso, and I want to ask this question because I'm just thinking about our backgrounds. For many of us, I grew up in a family where my father built his house, right? Nobody else at home has really bought a property. Where did you even get that courage from? You know, you said it was nerve-wracking. I can probably imagine it's still nerve-wracking for me at my age now to still buy a property, even though I've bought properties before. What gave you that courage? Who did you speak to? Did you speak to your parents? Yeah. You know, who was there to give you the guidance and assistance as to what do you choose? How much do you pay for it?
Yeah. You know, my life stage, I mean, I was young and I had nothing to lose at the time. But the developer that I went through allowed me to have a conversation as a typical first-time home buyer because I didn't know anything. Yes. I had a lot of questions around costs. I had questions around, do I get to choose how I want the property to look? Is there a possibility of being able to rent it out if I don't stay in the property? I think it was about being open to listening to other views at the time, and being open to taking a risk, because sometimes you have to be open to taking risks if you want to see returns on the investment that you choose to make. But it wasn't easy. I never forget the anxiety that I felt, but I could.
Yes.
I didn't have other responsibilities that would have pushed me away from making that decision at the time.
Yes. Okay, I mean, that's interesting. I think a lot of people, when you have conversations with them, especially your first time buyers, it is that anxiety that you talk about, you know. But I think maybe if we can just go into a little bit about what makes property such a powerful asset to have as part of your asset allocation.
Yeah. So if we look at property, and you look at possibilities around it, I'm going to simplify it as far as I can. Property, putting money into property and buying means that over time, over the long term, you can realize growth in your investment over time. I think secondly, it's also about, you know, the fact that you can derive some sort of ongoing income through that property. And I think the third one, what we almost, you know, sometimes forget, is that as part of your property, if it's bonded, and as you put money into your property, you know, you can actually access those savings. If you put more than the normal monthly repayments, you can access it again for anything, for emergencies. And hence I talk about that your property can actually be money that gets generated that you can use. I think the other one is as well, if you truly understand how the market works and the value of your property increases over time, you can then leverage that equity in your property and then ask for the additional equity that you can use for almost anything. And I think those are important, because even that equity that you get, you can use to invest in anything else. It could be a second property, or it could be investing in another type of asset class, or it could be anything else that your heart, you know, that you desire, depending on your, obviously, your vision and your dream and your strategy as an individual.
Yeah. And I think, Nondumiso, probably one of the most important things to also remember is just the very painful history that a lot of South Africans come from, and especially Black South Africans, you know, and ownership is probably another reason why a lot of people would delve into property. Have you ever felt that, or had anybody in your life that probably needed, you know, to buy for the ownership reason more than anything?
I think, you know, if I go back to how a lot of us grew up, and humble beginnings, yearning to earn, yearning to have something of value that you can either pass on to your own children or your own family. I think that becomes such an emotional aspect related to property. And you know, for a lot of reasons, our decisions are also attached to emotions. You almost want to make sure that you learn from the past and create something that becomes a legacy. And that influences our decision in some cases.
Sure. I mean, I just think about me coming all the way from Bushbuckridge into Gauteng and finding yourself renting and having that insecurity that anybody can kick you out at any time. And when I bought my property, one of the things I always say to my mom is, no matter if I don't have furniture, it is fine as long as I have my four walls. I am happy, you know. I think it does give you that security that you spoke about a little bit earlier on. But Nondumiso, how do you then ensure that you are buying property as an asset well, and you are taking care of that asset so it gives you what it can give you, or the best of its potential?
So, Nicolette, there's a couple of things that one would have to consider. I think first, it's your own current state in terms of financials, because that also determines, you know, how much you can borrow from a bank, and if you have a deposit. And it's also about looking at the location for that particular property, because we always say location, location, location. It is one of the most, if not the most important factor to consider. I think the third one also becomes, understanding the costs associated with buying into property. I mean, there's a lot. It's a deposit if you have. It's got its benefits.
Yes.
Secondly, it is the fact that if you're able to pay now as part of your deposit, you can get better interest rates from your bank. But it's also the costs associated with moving. It's your transfer costs, it's your registration costs, it's your levies if you're buying into sectional title, rates and taxes, initiation fees. It's a lot. All of those things put together determine, obviously, to what extent or what type of property you are able to get as an individual, and obviously based on your own circumstances and life stage.
I'm so excited that we actually got you for the first show, because I mean, you work in this space, you've been working in this space for quite some time. In actual fact, you guys are creating and putting together innovative strategies to be able to assist first-time home buyers. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on in terms of how do you support first-time home buyers. But Nondumiso, you speak about costs. How does one prepare themselves emotionally for that big ticket purchase like a property?
Knowledge is one way of helping yourself to prepare. And I think today, I mean, if you look around, there's a lot of tools that are available because they give you a sense of, how much you need to save. I want to give an example, the pre-qualification tool that we've got that gives you a sense, what is Absa Bank likely to give me if I apply for a home loan? Yes. And knowing that, it's a great step for you to start thinking about, okay, if the bank gives me X, this is possibly what the cost could be, because the calculators are also there. Knowing that and empowering yourself with that knowledge is the first step to understanding what do I need to start saving towards. But it's also about managing your own expenses. Some of us have found ourselves in situations where our expenses were beyond what we were earning as an income. But it's also saying, you know what, I've got to cut somewhere. I've got to manage my credit profile so that when the bank does indeed, assess me, I'm able to get an approval from the bank. So all of those things put together they play such an important role, Nicolette, when you do think about buying into property.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes, I can imagine how much anxiety one would get if they don't have that information. Sometimes there's many people that as first-time buyers want to buy, they're ready to buy, but it's just that there's that nagging feeling that you think there is something you're going to miss or you don't know something, But Nondumiso, it's also true to say that property is not for everyone, not an asset that is going to work for everyone. Who should not be buying property, or is there a reason that a person shouldn't be buying property?
For obvious reasons. If you are not financially ready to buy into property and take the responsibility of owning property, because it's not just a once-off transaction, right? You are going to have to maintain that property and make sure that you meet your obligations every single month for 20 years or however long you've chosen with the bank. It could be 25, it could be 30 years. If you're not ready for that financial commitment, then you should rather wait until you are ready for that. But I think also emotionally, understanding the responsibilities that are required of you as a homeowner to maintain your property, because you want to make sure that the value is great. You wouldn't want to see your property falling apart. It's important for you to understand the responsibilities. But I think the third one is also around understanding, the legal aspects around property. You can't now choose to sign an OTP and then tomorrow, I've changed my mind. I don't want this. Like, no, I can't do. No, that doesn't work. If you are not ready and you don't understand the legal implications, rather talk to someone and rather wait until you are ready to make that decision. But I think there are other influences that also come to play. It could be that, you know, your current life stage or your own circumstances maybe require you to move around a lot. So you will consider those aspects, and maybe you choose to rent, which is okay. For those people that are that see the need that I have to rent for now, if you have to move around because of the job, etc. And perhaps it could be that, you know, you really want to get the best location, so you would rather rent in that same location, get used to that space, and getting familiar with the surroundings, which would then enable you, once you're ready to buy into that property. It's many reasons, Nicolette, and I think, you know, it's an individual decision that you make, but you have to make it when you're ready, because buying into property is probably the biggest financial decision that most will ever make in their lifetime. And I think the last one, let me stress, is that, you know, when interest rates, because we at some point we'll talk about rates in the show. When interest rates change, when markets change, you have to be alive to those circumstances also impacting you. So you have to be ready to manage that if they do go up, comfortably be able to pay and keep your obligations with the bank.
Yeah. I want to squeeze in one more question before we actually take our quick ad break. I want to find out, Nondumiso, is it possible? Now, we've seen, you know, with the stock market, where companies have accounting irregularities, shareholders lose their money because, of course, if there's something that happens to the company that you have invested in, it obviously is going to take a knock on your investments. We've seen the bond market take its own knock. We've seen commodities take a knock. We've seen cash take a knock. Is there ever an instance where property as an asset class can actually take a knock?
You know, anything is possible. But, you know, when it comes to that question, we always say, go into it for the long term, because there's cycles, right? In some cases, if the market is down and there's impact on house prices, etc., all of those things you have to consider and understand the market cycle. When you go into it, it's ideally for the long term, you know, so that it cancels out the fluctuations in the market.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. And I think it's a great start to our conversation. And you've been really fantastic, Nondumiso. I mean, if there's anybody, if you are watching at home right now, if anybody is here to be able to hold your hand through the process of being a first-time home buyer, it can only be Nondumiso Ncapayi. So do stay with us. We're going to come back. When we come back, we talk a little bit about how does the bank then assist you as a first-time home buyer. Let's take a quick ad break. Welcome back to the First Time Home Buyer Show. My name is Nicolette Mashile, and we're going to be here every single Friday on the Private Property Facebook page or the YouTube page where you can tune in. Of course, remember that we're going to be taking your questions also, but we're speaking to some influential voices within the property space. And of course, in the investment space, that is a conversation that we have, of course, with Uzamantungo Khumalo. You can catch her at 7 o'clock every single day. Now, we're talking to Nondumiso Ncapayi, who is Head of Business Development at Absa Home Loans. And we've had a very interesting conversation with her so far, talking a little bit about the importance of property as an asset. And I think the standout for me is really, how do you prepare as a first-time home buyer if you are looking to buy your first property? Now, of course, we still have Nondumiso, and we're going to delve now right into how does the bank actually assist you. Nondumiso, welcome back to our show.
Thanks, Nicolette.
So let's talk a little bit before I get into how the bank really assists a first-time home buyer. Tell me, what has been your experience with the relationship that consumers have with the home loans section of the bank? What have you seen? What are the trends?
So I think when it comes to first-time home buyers, and broadly speaking, let me also make sure that I give you the right perspective. What we've seen over time is that a lot of first-time home buyers struggle when it comes to affordability.
Okay.
It's probably one of the biggest reasons why it's very difficult for them to enter the property market. The second reason being the credit records, or adverse credit records. Some have judgments, etc. And of course, it will make it very difficult to obtain any financing for property. Those are the big ones, specifically for first-time home buyers. But I think with that said, I think over time we've seen the average first-time home buyer getting younger and younger. Wow. And I think it also talks to the industry's readiness and willingness and solutioning to enable broader home ownership in South Africa. Certainly, even for us as a bank, we are constantly looking for various ways to close the gap. Yes. We talk about affordable housing all the way right up to affluent, etc. And it becomes important that we play a role, either it's from an education perspective, talking about the ins and outs of property ownership, or just the basics that we spoke about earlier on, being able to understand what costs are involved, what is the bank likely to lend me, etc. So all of those, I think when I look at the industry, I think there's a lot of tools out there. There's been, certainly when I started many, many, many years ago, some of those things were not in place, but now I definitely think if we look at trends, more and more tools are available. And I think the role of digital and digitization has really made it, possible to scale accessibility to some of the information and the learning and tools that are needed for first-time home buyers. So those are just some of the few things that we're seeing in the market.
That's quite interesting, because I'm just sitting here thinking to myself that if, I made a couple of mistakes when I was still in university. You take up clothing accounts, you take up gym accounts, and one day you wake up and your credit record looks like a Christmas tree. You've got all these different types of colors because you've missed some payments, and then you've got a couple of defaults there. And that can really be a hindrance for you to be able to access any type of credit. And as you're speaking, I'm listening to you say the first-time home buyers becoming younger, but I'm just worried now about that 24 to 35-year-old who is not necessarily as young and has carried these defaults, has carried these, these missed payments. How do we get to help them? How do we sort them out? They may have the affordability, but they've got this terrible looking credit report.
I think, sometimes we forget that there's this great, the fact that in South Africa, you can access a free credit report once a year.
Yes.
And we often forget that you can access a free credit report, understand it, look at it, unpack it for yourself. If you are declined for financing for your property, let's say today, it is not the end of the world. You can still come back. You can start dealing with your profile. It could be that you've missed payments, and it's really doing the simple things, right? And we make that information available to say, please don't miss your payments. Don't use your limits for any credit that you have. Try not to. Yes. And also it's about having your payment reminders and budgeting, etc. And those tools are available for customers that need assistance when it comes to getting ready to buy into property.
Yeah. And as a bank, what other tools do you guys have that a first-time home buyer can tap into even right now as I'm preparing to start thinking about the process of actually buying?
Yeah. The other one we spoke about in the first segment was the home loan estimator pre-qualification tool. In under 10 minutes, I kid you not, in under 10 minutes.
I'm going to test it.
Go test it. Go test it. Home loan estimator, put in your details, your income, expenses, and the bank will give you a view of, you know, what you're likely to get. And I think the second one is also the e-learning platform that we've got. It's easily accessible at any point in time. It takes you through the ins and outs of home ownership in your own time. I think also for us as well, the third one that we've got is the free borrower education that we do give. If you do come through the process and you are approved as a first-time home buyer and you happen to fall in a particular segment, we do give you that. And again, it's webinar, training. You can ask questions, engage, make sure you understand, you know, what's required of you as a homeowner, etc. But I think also, even moving beyond the tools, Nicolette, we've also designed products that solve for some of the painful things. The first one that comes to mind is for customers that earn below 25,400 per month. We give them attorney discounts for costs. Very, very important, 50% attorney discounts. We also factor in 0 initiation fees. And it's really there to ease the burden of having to put something forward as a first-time buyer.
I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, you know, I've got a group of friends, obviously, who are, we were first-time home buyers at some point. And the one thing we all cried about was that we just never planned for the attorney fees. You never planned for the initiation fee. And if you actually finance that initiation fee, you end up paying so much over 20 years or however many years you pay, just because you can't pay it upfront. So that sounds really fantastic. That is really, really great.
Yeah. And I think it gets even better, Nicolette, and I don't know how many people know this, but it is there for first-time home buyers. It's your government subsidy, you know, that's available. We talk about FLISP, you know, Finance-Linked Individual Subsidy Program for first-time buyers. If you earn between 3,500 to 22,000 and you meet the criteria for that subsidy, it can actually help you towards getting that financing. And I think the information is there. And as banks, you know, we play the role of also helping to provide that information and assist you to make sure that you're able to access that subsidy. I think it's important.
In fact, I wanted to ask you, whose responsibility is it to communicate FLISP? Because, you know, it's just every single person. I mean, for every four people I see, probably one person will know about FLISP, Nondumiso. It actually breaks my heart because it's there, it's available, and it's funds that, because they're government funds, will always go back if they're underutilized. You know, so whose responsibility is it to communicate FLISP?
So Nicolette, you know, I look at the industry. All of us have a role to play. I think together we are able to support home ownership. I wouldn't want to say it's a responsibility of one stakeholder. I think all of us are here to make it possible for South Africans to start creating wealth. As a bank, we partner, and through the Banking Association of South Africa, we engage on these elements, and hence we say, we play a role too. When you come in to apply, you're a first-time home buyer, we surface it. The information is there. And likewise, from a government perspective, the information is also available. I think it's the role of every single stakeholder who really wants to make sure that we really close the gap in terms of home ownership.
I love that. I absolutely love the way you contextualize everything and you bring it back to where it matters the most. And at the end of the day, I think all of us are really just, we're gearing on for everybody to have some level of home ownership at some point. But Nondumiso, we've got quite a number of questions that are coming in. So that really is a good indicator of how important the conversation we're having right now is. We've got one coming in from Andy, and she says, please give us information for those of us who are self-employed. I'm in the process of getting my first property and it's just been so frustrating. And I share the sentiments with her because my goodness, and self-employed, oh wow.
Oh.
Why don't you guys trust us?
I feel your pain, but you know what? Self-employed can also apply for financing. I know there's still quite a lot of ground that we have to cover to make it even more easy for self-employed to get into home ownership. I mean, there are cases where people will say, how come my employees can get, financing and I can't?
I patience to get it.
But it is possible. It is possible. You engage the bank. Of course, the requirements will differ slightly in terms of the documentation that's required. If you compare it to somebody that's full-time employed, because we look for salary slips, etc. It is possible. But ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a golden thread, Nicolette, and the golden thread is it's always going to hinge on affordability. All banks, if we look at the National Credit Act, we all have a responsibility to ensure that there's responsible lending. Whether you're self-employed, whether you're full-time employed, if your affordability meets the requirements, you should be fine. Of course, if there's a gap, even for full-time employed, those that don't meet affordability, obviously we can't give financing because we're trying to protect the consumer from overextending themselves. But it's also about us protecting, the bank from a risk perspective. So it goes both ways. But let me tell you, self-employed, please engage the bank, and let's see. And we can, we look at that. But affordability will always be the golden thread through that process.
I'm smiling because I'm just thinking to myself that in actual fact, the documents that you asked when you're self-employed, you should actually have, So it shouldn't be it's nothing new. It's things that you're supposed to have. You're supposed to pay your taxes, they do ask you for that if you need collateral. So it is things that we're supposed to have. It's just that it feels like you guys are asking us for blood and sweat and everything.
Yes.
Here's a question that really does excite me, Sis Nondumi. So Snenhlanhla would like to know, how do I get the bank to reduce or to negotiate my interest rate as a first-time buyer?
That's a lovely question. I think the important thing, the first one is really around if it's one thing that, I would ask you to remember out of this is if you can put a deposit towards your home. I kid you not, if you've got a deposit, it becomes easier to negotiate better rates for your home loan. Save towards it if you can. Secondly, I think people shy away from engaging, get their rate, and they're not sure, they're concerned. You know what? Be open, ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. But obviously, if you have a deposit, it makes it so much more easier from a bank point of view for you to get preferential rates. But I think also, Nicolette, maybe we need to come back again and stress a couple of things that the bank looks at when you do apply. So again, your affordability, income, expenses, the property that you're looking at, how much you wanna borrow, the term of that loan. Is it 20 years? Is it 25? Is it 30? So all of those elements, including your credit profile, how you've conducted your finances in the past, your credit exposure, all of those things have a critical role to play in us assessing what type of rate you will get. And it's individual based on your own profile. But please, if you can, put a deposit. It makes it so much easier.
Yeah. I'm very pedantic when it comes to buying property. I always say to people, you've got to prepare 12 months, nothing less than 12 months. It's a goal, you've got to work towards the goal. You've got to take the time. And I always say to people, pretend as if you already have the bond and pay for it every month for 12 months. One day and you've also trained yourself to pay a specific amount. So it does actually work out for you. So Mary would like to know what kind of people, and I love the way she's phrased this question, what kind of people, Sis Nondumiso, get this 100% loan from banks to cover their property financing?
I love the way that it's praised.
Yes.
Thanks for that question. What kind of people get 100%?
Yes.
It goes back to what we spoke about now. It's how you handle your finances. It's your credit exposure. So how much debt do I have? It's whether you have money towards a deposit that to show the bank that you've also got something that you're putting in. It's also about your credit profile, your history. All of the things we spoke about now will determine whether you get 100% or not. And I think always remember that, in fact, we've got the power as consumers, in fact, to determine that if we do all of those things right, we fix our finances, we budget, we don't overextend ourselves in terms of the credit limits we have on our credit cards and other things, and make sure that when you do apply, you do then get the 100% financing, purely based on looking at your profile as an individual.
Nice. Here's a tricky one, Nondumiso, and I don't know if it's something that first-time home buyers should be looking at. I mean, of course, when you're buying a car, most people will say, go to an auction, you'll get a good car, or you'll get a car at a good price. Could we also get into how the banks get involved in purchasing a property at an auction? And let's maybe answer it in a context of a first-time home buyer.
A first-time home buyer thinking of buying property at an auction, I think, what, you would need to do your homework. And really know what you're getting into. I would say be well informed if you do take that decision to go into buying property. It's typically property investors that would do this type of buying in auctions, because they know what's involved, legalities, the risks, and all of that. So I'd say as a first-time home buyer, you probably need to do your homework very, very well if you are going to do it for the first time, and obviously ask where something doesn't make sense. But what we've seen typically in this type of purchase is that it would be your property investors that are very au fait with auctions and the market, and looking for those property deals that will enable them to obviously grow their property portfolios.
Nondumiso, the questions are streaming in. I mean, I'm trying to pick the ones that really are, that I think quite many people would ask typically. Here's one that gets, I get asked this question quite a lot. Mpo Annie Matubatuba would like to know,
Hi, Nicolette. I missed a connection there. I hope you can repeat the question. Apologies.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Perfect. So they'd like to know, what is the best credit score to be able to get a home loan? I mean, that question comes up quite often.
The best credit score. So, in fact, let me take an example, because I do hope that you will go and do this online, because you'll get to understand where you stand from a credit score perspective. So in the home loan estimator that we spoke about earlier, the pre-qualification tool, when you do put in your details, your ID number, because of course we will check the bureau, and then when it comes back, you then put in your income and expenses. We'll look for affordability. We come back with a view as a score out of 10, because we like simplifying things, because some people talk about 600 and something, 800, etc. We try to make it simple as a score out of 10 to say, nons, looking at your profile, you probably sit at a 4 out of 10, which means there's a lot of other things you need to work towards. In other words, going back to the stuff we spoke about, reducing how much you owe, etc. So I don't want viewers to be confused with the numbers, because it depends again from where you're pulling your credit score. For some, it will be a different limit, but rather focus on the simplicity of it, and make sure that the things that you can control from your side absolutely will land you the best credit score at the end of the day.
Nondumiso, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. I think we lost connection there.
Yeah, the internet is starting to play games with us when we're coming towards the end. I'm glad it's towards the end, though. Just another quick question, Nondumiso, the last one. There's a lady who wants to understand if she's married to a non-South African, how can she go around, being able to get a home loan without having to fork out the very high deposit?
So again, it depends. How she wants to apply. So if I hear the question correctly, is she saying she doesn't have a deposit, Nicolette, towards that? Can you hear me, Nicolette? I think we've just lost connection. Hi, Nicolette, can you hear me? Hi, Nicolette, can you hear me?
And of course, it would not be a first-time show if we don't have some technical glitches. But I mean, it's been quite an interesting one with Nondumiso. And I think one of the last questions that I was asking her is what happens if you are getting married or you are married to a non-South African and you are trying to purchase a home using Nondumiso, how can you go around the fact that you need to put up a high deposit or in fact prove your affordability?
Hi, Nicolette, I hope you can hear me. I think for anyone applying, whether it's a joint bond, it's always going to be important that for that
try
joint
and get
bond.
Nondumiso again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Much better. So I think for anyone applying, and as a rule of thumb is that, for your own affordability, you have got to get to a place where you are very comfortable with your income and expenses and the amount that you're borrowing from a bank, irrespective of whether you've got a deposit or not. That will always be a golden rule. Everything hinges on affordability, whether you are purchasing a car or you're applying for a personal loan or a home loan. It's always going to hinge on affordability. And I'll say, look, if the timing is not right, it's always better to come back. But again, as I say, if I look at my own personal experience, engaging is not a bad idea. Engage the bank. At the time I did engage, I got the info that I needed, rather than sit and wonder whether you'll get approval or not. Is approach your bank and then we look at your own individual situation as a customer.
Yeah. Nondumisa, I would be amiss if I do not ask you for top 3 gems that you can give our first-time home buyers that are watching right now and sitting there and thinking, I've heard everything she said. I've heard about the affordability, getting myself emotionally prepared, but I want to press the play button now. What would you say to them?
Number 1, location, location, location. When you do think about property, think about location, because that plays an important role. I think the second thing is where, if you can, rather save towards a deposit, because that enables you to obviously get better rates from a bank. And the third one, you've got the power in your own hands to determine whether you get the full lending from the bank. And that hinges back on the simple things that we spoke about. It's your own affordability and making sure that you manage your own credit profile. Get a free credit report, get it once a year, look at it, unpack it. If something doesn't make sense, make sure you fix that, because it does have an impact when you do think about borrowing money from a lender.
Oh, Nondumisa, you've been absolutely fantastic. I missed all our technical glitches towards the end. You have been absolutely fantastic today, as always, as per usual. And I'm hoping to have you back, because I think there's quite a lot that I still need you to unpack with us. But for that, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. It is a Friday night after. Please do enjoy your weekend and Women's Day.
Thank you, Nicolette. Really enjoyed it, and looking back to coming back. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Brian Kepper. I'm a 10-time South African motorcycling champion. My family and I have chosen to live in Fourways. There's some really great suburbs in our neighborhood. There's a lot of families living in the surrounding areas, in places like Lone Hill and Cedar Lakes. What draws people to Cedar Lakes is that it's so close to the Broadacre Shopping Centre, Cedar Square and Fourways Life Hospital. Lone Hill is a major draw card for many families. It's got some great smaller commercial centres and some fantastic schools like Crawford College. From an entertainment point of view, Monte Casino really comes alive at night. There's so much on the go, and there's an incredible energy in the area. Our family just loves the fast-paced lifestyle that Fourways brings. But honestly, the thing that attracted us most to this area was the active lifestyle that it offers. As a family, we've chosen to live in Fourways because of the lifestyle and convenience, and this is our neighborhood.